Okay, we're back. We're back. We're back, everyone.
Okay, I have spattering brushes. I have a can of water. I have 2 colors of green, a kind of darker, duller green, and a brighter, more turquoisey green with some white in it. I have this white veiny color that I made for throwing, which I'll show you what I mean. And then I have this also for spattering. I have not thinned these down to a spattering consistency because I think I can kind of throw them as they are. But the first thing you're gonna do, I also have my water in a hand pump sprayer, and then I have our marble throwing tools, which is a special new thing that I will show you how to use. This is a wet marbling process. So I'm just gonna do a light spritz to keep my board wet and active. I based all these in this kind of dull tan color for y'all. It's MDF, it's a little thirsty. Yeah. So I can also see it, so I'm just gonna give it a little more water. I can see some of my hair down there too. Okay, so if you look at marble, it has these kind of shapes in here, and I call these lozenges, right? All marble is made by a process of heat in geological terms. So if you think about this like liquidy stuff in a lava lamp, that's how all these minerals and materials are moving. And then as they cool and settle, it traps that kind of movement. So I always think it's a useful tactic to think about how the material is formed naturally when trying to emulate it. Some marble will have a super strong directionality to it. This has a medium directionality. I see a lot of flow this way across the veining and the lozenges. It's all kind of dragging this direction. But some of them will straight up have strikes. So this is a kind of medium directional marble. It's got a slight downward angle, but it also has stuff that's pulling it up in the opposite direction. The first thing we're gonna do is a fast and loose lozengey scumble. So for this, since it does have a hint at directionality, you guys are gonna wanna pick a vague kind of direction to put your colors down in. So I always find it helpful to just kind of start by landing some of that for myself, right? You hear the board? I can hear it's wet. I'm gonna spray more water. Because I want this stuff wet and open while I work the whole thing. I have not glazed any of these paints because I want to use the water technique. Glaze is another option for keeping your paints open. Put some glaze and some water in there. But the glaze can kind of split and push in funny ways. So that's good if you have to do a piece vertically. But I like to use water. Like say I was doing a big stage floor, I would not push too much glaze into my initial colors because I want to use water to keep them alive and fast and loose. So I also am not trying to kill every little bit of my underpainting. I actually, even though this doesn't have much warm stuff happening in there, I think it's nice and I think it's an element worth keeping. I was thinking about making the underpainting like a mintier green, more like this, but I decided I wanted to put some warmth in it, just give some difference and some interest. And this delightful color was on the shelf, which was really handy too. So I just dropped my first set of colors, and a big thing with this, guys, is work fast. Just slap it out and work fast, because if you want it open, you want it alive, and so speed will help you do that. Keep a little water on it, because again, this MDF is thirsty. You can also see my board starting to pop up and pringle. That's a thing. I just let it be part of this, but that's me. So I'm losing my dark green. So I want to push a little more of that. Okay, so see how I'm letting it come into the other green a bit? I'm not trying to be to, I'm not trying to tell the paint too much what to do. I'm trying to let it kind of have its way. So, but I'm always being conscious of how I'm moving my brush around the marble. So I'm always trying to pull kind of this way right now because I really want to set up my initial directionality. So I may have a little too much water on here right now. So again, I'm probably going to come back and push a little bit more of my dark green back in. But marbling is a layering process. So that's the other thing. So you can see I've kind of started intermixing. You can see the warmth of my underpainting coming through. But again, look at how I'm always moving my brush in this directionality. And I'm also kind of trying to pay attention to where I start and stop and where I'm leaving like really big obvious brush strokes. So I've really thinned my dark green out a lot. But again, I'm not trying to get this down to the darkest green that you see in the pictures. I just want to make it so it's not quite as weeny. Okay, so now I have this down here. Now what I'm going to do is pull some spattering into this process. And this is where it gets fun. And Flora, I might get paint on you. Just beware, if you don't want me to get paint on you, I'm spattering and flicking paint. So I'm just going to get my spatter brushes wet a little bit because I haven't used them yet today. So I'm going into my Stumble colors. And I'm gonna just do some nice, big, wet, glorious, fast spatters. So you can see too, like these are not fat, thick base consistency, crazy heavy paints that I've made. I've thinned my paints out a bit to keep the flow moving. So there I did some tighter ones. And so the thing with getting the fat spatters is by having more paint on your brush that's kind of dripping like this, and then you come close into the board. You're kind of using that momentum, okay? So now I have a lot of grooviness. And you can also, my water's a little dirty. I don't want to go too crazy because my underboard is pretty wet at this point, but throw some water. This is where it makes the magic. And again, this is a wet marble technique. I do a super wet marble technique. It sometimes feels like cheating, but if this was a floor, I'd be like, sick. Leave it alone, and then we'll come back and glaze some veins in, call it a day, and be done with her. So I'm gonna see, I might have gotten too wet, but I'm gonna see if I can do the next step right now as part of this, because ideally you do it together. But this is throwing these little marbling pools. So Jillian got those little damp for me before class, which was really nice. And these kind of the way you use them as far as like treatment, care and treatment of these things, they're just muslin scraps that we've cut into this kind of Coke can, like soda bottle. This one's real fat. I don't want to use this one. Well, I just know it's gonna be too beefy, but this. So it's kind of like a soda can plastic top, like for the 6-pack cans. That's what they remind me of, 6-pack rings. But, so they're vaguely circly, vaguely diamondy, different widths. You can make this yourself out of any sort of material, but you wanna get them damp before you use them like a sea sponge. And then the same with cleaning them, you just put them in the buckets and squeeze them a lot. So they need to be damp for you to work with them because they'll stay flexible. And so I put on gloves because I'm gonna be dunking my hands in here. And again, here it's with this creamy white, which is a mite bit thinner than my base paints. But you'll see why. Why I want gloves. So I want a decent amount of paint on here, but I don't want it to be like drippy, so I'm not like squeezing it to the point I'm trying to get everything out. And then what you do is you just do some throws. This is like magic instant marble. It's like the best. So you can see it's picking up some of my paint my base paints, my greens. So the key to this is to not go too crazy too fast with it, because you can definitely like overwhelm your underpainting that you've created accidentally. And this white is not the most beefy, it's thinned out, so it's not wanting to take over. So you can be a little more controlling by kind of getting down in here with it and trying to control where it's going more. Again, keep in mind what this stuff looks like in the source image, because it's got my directionality. I sit up this way, remember my stripes? So initially I'm throwing with the same directionality, because again, if it's like a rivery lava lamp of goo in a volcano, it's all moving like a river. So the other thing that's happening, because my board's wet and this is really thin paint, is that when I'm tossing from a height, I'm getting these kind of starburst paint spatters, which in most cases is not something I like in my marble, because it can kind of give away the method. But for this stuff, I actually do really like it because it has really fat white veins, but then it has all these little things in there, and so I actually think that these little kind of frost legs are actually working in a really nice way on this one. So I'm getting close to feeling good about where this board's at for this step. Because again, marble's all about layers. So I'm gonna do another one this way a little bit. Another thing, I don't dig it too much, but I know people who have great success with this kind of way of using this tool. But I know some people who like to kind of jitter it around. So you can kind of build up like a more beefed out vein section if you wanted to play with this way of using the tool. But again, really pay attention. I actually saw on like YouTube recently some silly string art shenanigans where people get like shoelaces and like drizzle paint like maniacally all over something with a medium of some kind and then like drag a string through it. And I feel like this is a similar thing. So I feel like I'm in a pretty good place with where this board is right now. Again, it's different. We're not at that dark purpley business yet. And I'm not trying to copy this exactly. I just pulled it to be my inspiration and reference for shape. I like the fat veins. But yeah, I definitely haven't put anything that's got that cool purpliness to it. And so I will probably add that into a glazing thing for one of the next steps. I want to kind of make a chunkier white fog. So I like that right now. At this point, you can spatter more if you feel like you need it. You can throw a little more water if you feel like yours needs it. I'm actually going to do just the most gentle of white spatters. And I'm going to try and keep these ones tight. Just to get a little more of this white freckling in behind. Yeah, I like it. I like this one. I think this is actually going beautifully much faster than I expected, which is fun. So I think this is really good color setup for you guys, which is nice. So does that make sense as far as how you start tackling? Do you guys feel good about giving it a go? We can get some more containers and split these off, and if anyone wants to use my big brushes for spattering, please feel free. I don't think I have quite enough. You can stop.